Welcome to Andrew Broussard Watercolors. For those of you new to the channel, the beginning of these videos are a little delayed, mainly because I live stream them at first on Twitch. So, it just gives people a moment, to kind of come into the chat, ask questions, etc. And you can find links down below to my live stream information. Anyway, if you're watching this on YouTube or Patreon or something at a later date, feel free to jump ahead to the actual painting process. At this point in my filming tutorial career, whatever you want to call it, there's not too much editing taking place. Down the line, that's something that I want to change. Right now, it's just getting a lot of practice in. Without further ado, let's just jump into what the plan is while I set everything up. So today's I think August 4th, I started this marathon session of painting and uploading videos onto YouTube and Patreon back on like March 13th. That's when they had released us from work due to stay-at-home orders for COVID. And what I say, today is August 4th, so that's almost 5 months of just like almost doing a video a day, some days doing 2 videos a day, painting multiple paintings a day, and I feel like I've grown quite a bit. So this is it's kind of a weird nostalgic type video. This is going to be, I'm going to label it the 201st video. And I want to say I was at 50 demos when COVID had started, so that's like 150 videos. A few of them were like reviews, some of them were little sketches talking about different things that were taking place in art, coming up with experimental ideas, etc. So it's been interesting. And today, for some odd reason, I decided to tackle something very difficult that I haven't touched upon in easily 10 years. The painting of glassware. And especially, I've never touched it upon with any type of water media. Watercolor, I'm too hesitant to try that out in watercolor. The plan was just to kind of paint, not live stream, and do work on oils. But a part of me really wanted to just live stream and kind of just talk and chat and hang out for a bit. So I kind of shake off some cobwebs and use gouache as a way of experimenting at first. My friend keeps on saying, I don't understand what gouache is. I don't understand what gouache is. At this point, I'm not sure if he's just like joking around, because I feel like I tell him every time. But I'll kind of go into a little bit of detail about what gouache is for people that don't know. First of all, there's 2 types of gouache, and this is essentially kind of like a water-soluble gouache. There's another type that is acrylic, where once you dry, you can't rework it. Essentially, gouache is like watercolor, but more opaque. It's not as finely ground, so I believe it has a tendency to sit on top of the paper, as opposed to really migrating into the between the fibers of the paper. Though you can use gouache watered down like watercolor in washes, or you can use it thickly and opaquely to layer like oil paint or acrylic paint. Gouache, the term, comes from I believe was an Italian word that meant mud. And it was Italian, Italy, France, those type of areas. The carryover to watercolor is often, I'm just looking at what brushes I want to use for this one. The carryover to watercolor is often just the white gouache, something like this. And in watercolor, there's a whole bunch of, bickering and fighting about white paint and if it should be utilized. I think it was utilized in the 1800s in painting. There's a great article on handprint.com about Victorian era watercolors and gouache and myths and things like that. So there's some good information on there as well. But essentially, at the end of the day, gouache is just an opaque watercolor. And you could kind of work it in different fashions. And it's been allowing me to practice and explore concepts before I do it in oil. Anyway, so I think I have everything set up. Now, like I said, today's subject matter is something that is way out of character for me. It's painting glass. I'd show you the picture that I took, but it's just not going to show up at all on this screen. I'm going to set the Kindle to the highest setting, and we'll put that back up, and I'll just kind of show it for a moment, and I doubt you'll be able to really pick up anything in it. Essentially, it's just super, super dark, and I had taken a box, I cut a hole in the side, and I awkwardly stood there with a flashlight shining in at different angles while photographing with the Kindle to try to get a very moody looking, catching the light scenario. Okay, so I'll start off with some burnt umber. I might add some colors as we go along. I put out burnt umber. What else did I put out? Yellow ochre, vermilion, black, titanium white, and ultramarine. For some reason, I think that a cool highlight will work with that glassware, with the lights that show up. This paper is Stonehenge Aqua. In the beginning, when I was ordering sheets of paper, I would sit there on the kitchen floor with a razor blade and a long, very long ruler, and cut the paper up into 8x10s, and then from there have some leftover for some 5x7s and all that. But personally, I found even just taking time to do something like that was just pulling away too much time from painting. And this was when, before COVID, where everything was just super, super, super busy, work-wise. So tomorrow we return to work. The teachers go in for professional development, and then there we're going to be in our classroom. So first we go in as a group, I think, into the auditorium, and they're going to have the overhead projector on, and they're going to live stream probably some sort of generalized thing to all the teachers in the parish. Then from there we're going to go into our own classrooms, and we're going to have Zoom meetings with our respective departments, like science or math or business, things like that. And then the next 2 days are just professional development within the school itself, where we're not going to meet with curriculum coordinators or anything like that. We're going to meet with our assistant principal and people along those lines. So I'm taking my black and a little bit of yellow ochre. This is going to give me kind of a greenish tint. I still have the burnt umber on the brush. I don't really do anything cleaning. And this, by the way, is I think a combination brush where I don't have to wash it off to see. Within the Chinese painting, they have a few different materials that they'll use. One for a more stiff brush, one for a more looser mop application, and then a combination brush will have the fibers from the two different, I guess, animals. I think one is goat hair and the other one is, I'm not sure what they use for the stiffer one. So I took these pictures last night, and I've just been very excited about painting these. But as of right now, I'm just building up that background. Which the nice thing about gouache is then I can paint over it and work towards the light. I think this paper is exactly 8 by 10, which worked out, like I said, mathematically with cutting up a big 7 by, what was it? Sorry, 22 by 30 paper. However, it leaves very little wiggle room if it was going to be matted or framed or anything like that. And within a lot of the watercolor paintings, I always talk about painting to the edge. It's kind of weird thinking that the mat's going to be right there, so the whole image is going to be here. Compositionally, I'm going to try to maintain a very small image so that it doesn't seem like the viewer looking at it says, I wish they had a bigger canvas or a bigger piece of paper to paint on. And try to incorporate a lot of just the negative space. So now, idea-wise, this is the one flattened out. My inkwell, which was, this one was given to me by a coworker, very nice lady. She teaches special ed, and in one of my math classes I had, some special ed students. So the way we work it is we have an inclusion teacher, a special ed teacher that's there as well, to give them more hands-on assistance. And she, being an older woman, her mother had passed away, I believe, and her mother had collected a lot of antiques and whatnot, and just kind of massing in this one. Anyway, her mother had collected a lot of antiques and was in fact had friends that were antique dealers and would kind of give her, just for some reason, the lower grade, lower quality inkwells. I guess that was just something she collected. And so my friend, my coworker, gave me 2 of those, which is really nice. This one has like kind of a hobnail glass on the bottom, which I think will give an interesting effect. It's going to cast its shadow here. And then it's going to go into a dip pen that I had laid out. And I've had this dip pen, this one, for years. Haven't really used it, but it's quite beautiful. I'd gotten it at Festival International. I probably paid way more than it was worth. I'll tell you right now, I definitely paid more than what it was worth. But it was one of those things that, you see it and you like it. You want it kind of like, just artwork. I'll probably wind up putting down a purplish red on the palette for this guy, just because of the feather. It's kind of a dyed purple. And I'm going to play around with a lot of probably yellow ochre on here to give it a bronze look. So that's going to be another learning piece right there. This is just massing in the shape, like I said, and looking to see how the shadow is going to sit. In fact, this shadow will gradiate into this kind of shadow back here. So as of right now, just massing in shapes, building up the dark background. As it lights, it lightens up as it dries. It's kind of where that corner in the back of the box was. But I'm going to let that line be broken by this object right here. And I'm also going to let it be broken by the feather as well. So rather than having a continuous line across the back of the painting, we have that break there, which will be important. A little bit burnt umber. So this is almost like a tonal study, setting it up right now. I guess you could almost say it's like a grisaille, which would be a, if that's the correct pronunciation, it would be an underpainting for an oil, where you would then let it dry and then paint over it with the colors, kind of do the localized colors from there. This is essentially right now just using the Zorn palette plus burnt umber, but if you don't have burnt umber, you can mix the light red or the vermilion with a I don't like the angle that this is at. I'm gonna kind of correct it. You can mix that with your black to get this color. It's just more of a convenience to have burnt umber. I have a tendency not to really sketch or draw anything in beforehand. And that's just the way I prefer to work. Your move may vary. You can kind of sketch in your elements beforehand. In fact, just doing a preliminary sketch on the side would have probably helped me set this one up in a more comfortable position. Now this one, if you can see, this is, I believe, the mixed haired one that I was talking about, where it has the mop qualities as well as a potential stiffer form. I'll hold it closer so you can kind of see how it's white and then darker on the inside. So that's a combination brush. You can find those off of Amazon. I think that I got this from Blue Heron Arts. Really fantastic fella who, David Lee, who owns a store out in California, I think. But I bought it off his website. And he has just great stuff. Great product. Lots of good videos. And I think one time I called to ask questions about some of the material, and he answered the phone, so it was kind of like starstruck. Yeah, which is pretty cool. Alright, so I think I'm going to do one more pass around, and then I'm going to do a dry off and start working on the actual elements. I'm just, like I said, building up that dark density, creating the forms. Visual properties when dry. They say gouache has some different potential effects, a more matte look to it. In fact, apparently it was utilized in design work, graphic design, where they weren't worried about the light fastness of the end product. They were more worried about being able to scan and copy the artwork, and having a matte property would have less glare to make it a lot easier for scanning to take place. So it was very popular in the graphic design or industrial design, I guess, field. The nib will be about here. Shadow will be about there. Okay, so already we have like kind of a 3D effect taking place. We have our object drawn, a little bit of tonal variety. Perspective is, for the most part, there. This guy recedes back. This one's right in the middle. There's just like a little teeny bit receding back. I should have probably given more of a side when I took that photo. And then there's going to be the lid, not the hole in the top. And it's going to wind up doing reflections, etc. So let me dry this off, and then we're going to start actually massing in and trying to create this glass work. unfortunately, as you can see, we had quite a drying shift take place. This is just a common occurrence amongst the water media, the watercolor and apparently the gouache. What is happening is that using water media, it has water in it. So whenever you are looking at it, think about it in terms of a wet sidewalk or a wet blacktop or cement. It looks darker than when it's dried. What's happening is a physical phenomenon, reflection, refraction, where light is going through it, but it's also going through the water, and that's bending it, and it's changing the darkness to it. So when it dries, the water evaporates, and you're not having that other barrier between the light and you and the object. So that's what's occurring. Something that you always want to keep in mind with landscape painting. If you watch those videos that I do, we do a lot of landscape painting, and I love to throw in Payne's gray. And to quote Ron Ranson from his books, when he would paint skies, he'd be painting when it wet, and he'd put in a lot of Payne's gray, and people would gasp and be astounded by how much black essentially he was putting into the sky, or gray. But because of that drying shift, it lightened up quite a bit. So always keep that in mind whenever you're doing any type of water coloring or gouache. Be prepared for that. I have read that like some aspects of gouache are different, where some colors will seem to dry darker. I'm not sure what colors that they are, and I'm not as experienced with that. There are some colors in watercolor where you don't seem to have that strong drying shift as well. And that's when you start having to, you know, really practice with your medium to learn the ins and outs of the palette. So I'm taking that dark mix still. I'm not really adding any color to it. Might actually add a little bit of ochre right in here. Might be a little too much. I'll put that right in here. Just a little bit of, just a wash of ochre. And when I say ochre, I'm referring to yellow ochre. And kind of building up a gradient on this, the table. I remember when I was painting, life drawing painting in college, and I had taken those classes on the side, you know, just, I guess, essentially as electives or for fun. The professor, Chris Semerjeff, I want to get a little bit underneath here, even though it'll probably move around, just because, like I said, this paper is cut really close to 8 by 10, and that would show up underneath the mat. Anyway, one of the first things the professor had said was just don't just add white to things as you get closer to the front. So I'm keeping in mind just a combination of my umber and the ochre to create this. So the different parts of a fountain pen, not a fountain pen, a quill pen, a dip pen, will obviously have different names for it, but I'm just going to call this the grabby part, the part that we hold. I'm just kind of putting that in place just so I can kind of look at the shadow. I personally, in my personal life, I collect fountain pens. I originally got into them, and this is a quill pen, so there's two differences there, two different things. But I collect fountain pens. I'd gotten into them because I was looking at inks as a medium, an art medium, and with those, and I had done the Chinese painting, which had the black ink, but I was looking at different colored inks, light fastness and all that, and I came across a brand called Noodler's Ink, who have always been very kind to me when I've asked questions and whatnot. And anyway, so I started getting the pens that you would use with the fountain pen ink. You know, in fact, some of the inks you'd order and they would come free with a pen. So I started trying them out, and I really enjoyed it. It felt different. It was a different experience for me for drawing and writing. So I then started like trying out different brand pens, and then slowly worked my way into, unfortunately, very, different vintage ones and antique ones, which was really cool. And then my students had asked, oh, the fancy pen, what do you use and blah, 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 because they would see me using fountain pens. And, I started telling them about it, and I had, at that point, amassed quite a bit of these cheap Chinese pens. I'm just taking this dark mix to still just do my darks, not really playing too much with it, any changes. Anyway, so I started playing with the pens, and the kids started asking about it, and I started handing out some cheap Chinese knockoffs, like literally like dollar fountain pens, where people say order 3 of them to see if one of them works type deal, from China. And so I had done that. This has an edge to the glass. It's like a beveled edge, I guess would be the term, where it kind of does a bend. Pay attention to that. Anyway, and then I posted on Reddit about it, and I was feel good. I was, pat on the back that I gave kids fountain pens and that I got them interested in it. And then people all throughout the world started sending fountain pens and inks for my students. And if you go on my YouTube page and look up fountain pen in the classroom or just fountain pens, you'll either see like me doing like a little bit of review or utilizing fountain pens for art, or you'll see me in my classroom kind of talking about the setup and how I got kids using the pens. Trying to paint what I see, and I'm just kind of looking at the darks right now, and looking at it, I think for the most part, once I switch over to oils, and I'm not going to do oils on top of this, I think I would have to treat the paper or the painting in some way, shape, or form to do oils on top of it. If you did oil on regular watercolor paper, it would seep in and eventually rot the paper out. So that's why you have to have some sort of essentially like a gesso primer type down on the material to help slow down that soaking in, or to inhibit that. One thing that helps is to go back and forth with the object that you're working on in the background, at least for me, where I just want to take a moment to kind of just move away from it. So I'll darken up this spot. One thing I'm trying to move away from and putting it into words has been a little difficult for me is that the way this looks right now, it looks like a modern study, and I really want to achieve the old master effects. You know, the Dutch masters, the still life painters from 1800s, 1900s, you know, that time period. Warmer, so it's just kind of burn umber wash. And that wash gradient over. Almost pure water. Alright, my image shut off. Now, let's see. Let me put more of my darks in here. I think I'm going to start mixing the ultramarine into this. The goal being kind of a cooler blue, cooler dark. Oh, and my friend that I had mentioned that doesn't know what gouache is, I think that was asking what gouache was. He had watched the videos and he had asked, how do you know water concentration levels, like how much water to use when making these, when painting with watercolor or gouache? The only answer is just experimenting and learning. The one rule of thumb that I always do abide by, though, is that you want to, if you're painting wet and wet, to increase the pigment load and decrease the water content, and that'll prevent backfills and cauliflower and all that stuff. This is my last day of the summer, essentially. This is where the hobnail is going to show through. I'm going to wind up using white, but I really don't want the chalkiness of the white to be used yet. trying to mitigate that. I can just go to a more ultramarine wash now. I might actually have to wind up using some white. You know, like I said, this is essentially a first for me in a water medium, doing any type of glass work, and 10 years since I've done any type of glass work. There's umbers and ochres in this picture that are showing through, being reflected right here. And I'm gonna have to do a dry off and then come back and correct that. So I guess if I had to say any sort of plan, working from dark to light with this. This is one of the darkest parts of the glass, that opening. Now, I do like to move away from one spot if I feel overwhelmed or if I'm spending too much time on it. So I'm going to move back to this guy. I'm going to continue increasing the darks on him. But I'm also going to start looking at the yellow ochre. It's a little too green, but we'll see, to start adding, trying to get a bronze effect on it. Okay, it narrows. And then this part is more of a nickel color, so I could use the black and then come over it with my white. In fact, I should probably now start looking at a little bit of white gouache in there. Get that silver nickel effect, or at least start working on that. I need to get this to be straight. Then here I can take my burnt umber, that just red is what it's just called, this Da Vinci brand paint, and I can start putting this in and mix some ultramarine in there for that more purplish. Using a number 4 rigger for most of this, just seems to put good quantities of pigment down and hold quite a bit. Here's where that shadow comes into it. nib come out. And here, I'm gonna have to get a more fine brush out for that. All right. I build up the background. This is probably the last time I'm going to pass anything on the background. Hopefully it's the last time I pass anything on that background. Looking at the Kindle that I have for the live stream, I noticed that my hand does pass in front quite a bit at times, so I apologize for that. In fact, let me get a little bit where that clip is, because as I was saying, being so close in tolerance and size to 8x10, that if this somehow made its way into matte, really don't want any white to show up. Probably don't even need to clip it at this point. And I'll clip it if we start seeing any buckling or movement issues. You warm up the shadow a little bit, get some color in there. This is adding Venetian red into this mix. And it's not going to be a solid shadow, it's going to have some cast light coming through it. Probably one of the most important things is teaching yourself how to see. Like in this case, I really didn't see that cast light coming through, and now I have to be aware of that. You know, this is casting a glare. Let's see if that'll help you all out. You get very fine lines with these Chinese brushes. I don't use them for any other type of painting anymore, only for gouache. Which Chinese paints are very similar to a gouache, to be honest. They're more opaque, more opacity. This guy's just going to cast that dark shadow. more pure water just to soften that edge. All right, let's do a dry off, see where everything's at. I'll put the clips back on after that dry off. Okay, if you have headphones on, watch your ears. So that should be good enough for the dry off. Let me clip this back on. So I'm gonna just pull it away for a moment. And then, like I said, I have my sides have paint on them, so the mat does wind up going over it, which I'll show you the final results with the mat over it. Let's see, okay. Let's see where we're at now. Okay, so the way I'm seeing this glass is that I'm gonna wipe off some space on this palette. By the way, this is a Butcher tray palette. Got this one from Michaels. Oh, we got Equal Mage in the live chat. How's it going? I'm trying something different. I have a photo that I had taken of a inkwell and a dip pen, and this is in gouache, which is opaque watercolor, and it's the first time in like 10 years doing any glass work, so it's me doing this as an experiment, a preparation, if you will, for an oil painting. So Equal Mage, how you been doing? Anything new with you? Taking that ultramarine, mixing it with the titanium white. Now there's the glass I told y'all was a hobnail pattern on the bottom. Hobnail, I believe, is just any type of glassware that has the bumps, the ridges on it. In fact, it has stuff in it right now, or would have taken it down to see for y'all to see. And those ridges on the bottom actually create kind of a perspective line, because they'll go back to about here, and it'll go back, and then it'll start creating a radiating out line. And doing this study forces me to see that. I didn't notice that before. I knew that the ridges were there. It's pretty apparent, but something simple like that creates a very interesting effect. This will have to be a yellow ochre and a gouache. And a white gouache. There's a nice, beautiful highlight on this edge. Then a more, water it down so it goes down lighter. That's too much. This is the light coming through. Trying to get a very subtle. That is not subtle at all. Okay, let's migrate down to this piece. Let's see if we can get that copperish tone, like a bronze tone. This is burnt umber and yellow ochre. Now I'm trying to think of how I would dull this down. One thing I think of is adding black to it. And it comes to about here. And then we get a reflected light on the bottom side taking place. I'm going to grab my dark for that dark shadow. And the nib, which I'm going to have to use, I could use this brush for it. Let the nib come out. That's the reflection of the nib. Then we're going to use black and white for a gray to get a kind of silver tone for it. It's going to come out. This is actually, the nib is blue, but it's not showing blue in it. I don't do calligraphy, but I had bought some different nibs to try out for art. And this nib is referred to as a blue pumpkin. It's I can't think of the name of the brand. Browse, a Browse nib. It's not really standing out just yet, so I'm gonna have to come back over it. Might actually have to do highlights amongst it to get it to relax. For example, here's highlight here. I can crisp up this edge. Could even take this crispness, put it under here to show that it's not directly touching there. And we have a shadow, not a shadow, light from the table showing through underneath. That'll give it more of a 3D effect. Now, kind of working my way around this painting. Let's go some ultramarine and red for purple. And kind of a little negative painting to create this guy's shape, because it has that silverish, nickel-plated top connecting to this feather that's been dyed. Add black. And darken that shadow. This is where the base of the wall is. I figured it'd be nice to just have that little shadow element up on the wall. Cast it. All right, now on this nickel-plated part, there is a little pattern. I'm not going to try to do the whole pattern, but I'm going to try to do the illusion of the pattern. It's here and arrows here. I'm going to put dots, and then I'm going to dot back over it with white highlights. Should be something as simple as that, hopefully. I'm trying to make sure it also has a nice line quality of one part to the other, and that it doesn't seem like the pen is broken or twisted in any way, shape, or form. Some yellow ochre. There's going to be highlights in some regions. Push this part down. I'll come back to that in a bit. You know, just kind of working my way around the painting. It's probably actually a good point to do a dry off. Let's see if there's anything I want to do on the glassware first. So these are the two highlights right on that corner. The hobnail catches a little bit of light. Those are the lightest aspects of it. That might be too white. Let me do a dry off so we can see the whole thing and what everything's looking like. I might have to fix this angled line. All right, and there. Now we'll go back to the nickel plated part on here, and we'll start creating that pattern. Straight line would come back to about here. So I'm trying to keep that straight. Some more pure white, so I kind of had a mixture of the black and the white. We do have a lesser effect down here. Highlight, highlight, highlight. Nope. This comes to a sharp point. All right. So I laid those marks right there, but I want to spread them out. I don't want it to just seem like there's a too obvious of a line that I've put there. All right, now let's look back at the glass. Ultramarine blue into this grayish mix. Too blue, more white. Darken it up. Even darker for this inside, because this inside is dark. The curvature changes inside the glass here. Well, actually, I'm pretty dry right here. Grab. Let's use the #1 rigger just to make things easy. And grab some pigment. Color of the table, so we can see through right there for the color of the table. Also right here. And then we have that curvature of the nib, and then the shadow. Taking water to kind of pull that out. Let's fix this transition. Just passing water over it, kind of scrubbing. Fortunately, I'm going to have to do another dry off so I can see things better. I'm going to grab some pure black for a few spots, and then I think I'm just going to call this one done at that point. So I'm trying to bring out some of the darks on this nib. More to get the nib crisp than anything else. a little too highlighted, too bright. Burnt umber. Trying to fix up this side. This angle should be more like that. Just fixing a little perspective issues that I'm seeing. Looking at the live stream. Bit of just that pure black. This actually catches a little bit of light at one point, but not a full highlight. Just a little bit right here, right here. Okay, so I think it's safe to call this one done. Let me dry it off, put the mat over it, we'll see what it looks like, and then probably call it a day. Also sign this one before we put a mat on it. So of course, you're always welcome to follow along with any of these videos, and I would love to see y'all's results. Also, if you have any questions, comments, anything like that, please let me know. Also, please like, subscribe, follow. Also, consider supporting me on Patreon if you'd like. A whole bunch of different things. Okay, so clips are removed. Got this guy right here. Let me find the mat to see what it would look like. It doesn't have a white mat right here. I should have a black mat somewhere. I think a black mat would look better. Yeah. Let me grab a black mat so you can see what that will look like. Because that white mat is just too much for this. I don't really paint in a style that seems to be good with a black mat. Oh, this is a blue mat. Blue, it'll be fine. It's like kind of a dark blue. And we want the nib to show, maybe right there. Yeah, so I think you can see the whole thing on the screen. I don't have to move things around. Well, I hope you enjoyed. Fortunately, I haven't figured out a better way to film my painting when it comes to oil colors, but that'll be something that I'll work on, you know, just having that setup worked on. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll talk to you all soon. Have a great day. Bye.